Welcome to our first video recorded episode of Beyond the Cable. I'm here with Chris Sikora. He's the CRO of Great Plains Communications. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here, Brad. Really appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, and well, as CRO of Great Plains Communications, you have a pretty exciting viewpoint of what's happening in the industry. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce our audience to who you are.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So I've spent the majority of my career kind of in the competitive fiber optic telecommunications business. So started out, as a salesperson in the commercial space, literally like driving around, talking to businesses, showing them a map of where we plan to build fiber and how awesome it would be for them to become a customer. So companies like MFS Telecom and TW Telecom and things like that. So sort of grew up in that space, always at a challenger type company, always at a company that was building and competing against the big names in the industry. So came up as a salesperson, sales leader through that. Ultimately became a general manager where I ran both, sales and operations and a true profit and loss. Was at Con Edison Communications, which was a fiber optic entity of the power utility in the New York City area. We ultimately successfully sold that business to RCN Communications, which is now Astound. Joined Level 3 Communications, did a 13-year stint with them, 11 of those years. I ran their Northeast operation for them, kind of Virginia north to Montreal. Then moved to Denver from New York City, where I live now, to do a headquarters stint running a marketing team there for what became CenturyLink and is now Lumen. Couple of other cups of coffee at places, and then 2.5 years ago, came to Great Plains Communications, where I'm in charge of all things revenue for the company. So on the residential side of our business and on the commercial side, the wholesale side. So the industry has been really, really good to me. And from my perspective, it's always been an exciting place to work because of all of the just, huge shifts in technology. And, in our part of the business, we're right there in the middle of those kind of tectonic shifts.
Well, that's a great segue to our first question, really, here at the meat of our interview. Chris, there are a few people that are better positioned to answer this probably than yourself. How is the need for computation and data centers changing the entire broadband ecosystem, really from top to bottom?
So I was thinking about this in preparation for our conversation today. And I think I would point to kind of like three major shifts in, if we want to just broadly call it the data center space. Sort of, in the beginning of all this, companies had their data centers with their mainframes, and ultimately those became servers, but they were, proprietary data centers that likely sat on a corporate campus somewhere, at least for large companies. That's what happened. Or maybe it was in the basement of a hospital, that type of thing for those types of customers. And then these sort of third party carrier neutral data centers developed. One, because people needed the right infrastructure. They needed the right power availability, redundant power, cooling capacity. They needed a place to put these computational engines, however you want to define that. And they also needed to connect to other things, right? With the advent of the internet, now all of a sudden there's just this massive interconnectivity need came. And so by being at this location that really became an ecosystem with other companies, software as a service providers, ISPs, access to the public internet in other backbone ways, telecommunications carriers, fiber optic companies like I've worked for. So you sort of had that movement out of those proprietary corporate data centers, or at least an extension into these third-party data centers. Then Boom, big shift. AWS effectively invents cloud computing, right? And now there's a big movement to the cloud, just all of the operational efficiencies that companies could gain, CIOs could gain about moving applications into the cloud, getting an almost instantaneous national footprint and some types of global footprint based on the needs that these companies had, and just getting just access to just better, cheaper compute resources, be it AWS, be it Azure, be it Google Cloud, Oracle, all of these cloud compute companies. And now, I mean, just a step function shift with the advent of AI. So now, massive needs for compute power from these AI companies. And again, many of the same names that I just mentioned, AWS and Google and Meta and other hyperscalers are out there. And one of the interesting things is, you have these third-party carrier-neutral data centers that were often in tier 1 cities, tier 2 cities, kind of central business districts. Then you had AWS, Azure, Google, finding places like Northern Virginia and other places to put that cloud compute. Now AI, the amount of space that they need, the amount of cooling, the access to power and power at competitive rates. I mean, these folks have gone further and further afield. So they're no longer in the central business districts, or they might not even be near a tier 1 city. So we see this great big giant shift in size, scale, and a shift to very, very different geographies. Now, for someone like us that provides bandwidth, fiber optic connections into those types of things, that plays very, very well, because our heart and soul at GPC is we're a construction company. We feel best when we're putting backhoes in the ground and we're laying fiber optic cable. So the fact that these companies have these needs to get fiber optic cable to these locations at scale, really, really plays to among some of the core competencies that we're really proud of.
Well, Chris, I'm sure it's a double-edged sword, not for GPC, but for the industry at large. You have this secondary and reliable stream of revenue in the future with data centers, but also you have to be positioned to capitalize on that. And I know Great Plains Communications has done that well. Can you tell us how you've been able to position yourself to kind of ride that wave?
I think it's maybe 3 or 4 things. So we've got the core competency, we've got the willingness, we've got the financial balance sheet that can fund this. And then I think probably the final thing is the people that we've got and the company culture that we've got. I think we are very, very nimble. We're very scrappy, so we're out there ready to lean in.